Automotives, a podcast covering the most important issues for the automotive aftermarket industry in Europe and beyond. Brought to you by FIA.
Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to a new episode of Automotives, the podcast series covering the most important issues of the European and international automotive industry in general and the independent parts and maintenance sector in particular. My name is Álvaro de la Cruz, Head of Communications of FIA and your host. Today, we are so pleased to host Laurianne Krid, Director General for FIA Region 1. The International Automobile Federation brings together leading national motoring organizations from 146 countries worldwide, and it is the governing body of the world motorsport. The FIA Region 1 office, based in Brussels, is a consumer body comprising 100 mobility clubs that represent over 36 million members from across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Welcome, and thank you for being with us, Laurianne.
Thank you for having us, Alvaro.
Thank you. We are meeting today because of a very worrying development in a crucial phase of the legislative process for a sector-specific law for access to vehicle data. FIA, FIGIFA, and 8 other European associations of the automotive sector sent this week a joint letter to the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and to the whole College of Commissioners about the urgency of action as we learned about a new delay in the legislative process. The FIA Region 1 represents the consumer perspective in the access to data debate. How do you see the consumers already being affected by the lack of sector-specific legislation in the data economy, Laurianne?
Well, thanks a lot. I think the first and foremost thing we're seeing with consumers is that they are not embracing this change. They're actually not getting the value that they would expect from their data. And again, this move this week was extremely surprising and disappointing because there's a heavy work that's been done to show that there needs to be a bit more openness, that consumers need to be able to share their data with whoever they want, of course, in a safe and secure manner. And that's something that I say would almost be consensus. Hence, the political stop is quite worrying for consumers that they won't be able to reap the full benefits of the digitalization of transport.
In their joint press conference about the Data Act, Commissioner Vestager and Breton said that sector-specific legislation and access to vehicle data will follow. We totally agree, because for the Data Act to have a full effect, this sector-specific legislation was necessary in order to define technical specifications of the automotive sector requirements. What has changed since then, in your opinion, and why is the Data Act alone not sufficient?
Well, that's indeed two questions. Let's start with what has changed. I mean, to be honest, looking back, not much has changed. The access to car data and car data generally has been regulated in the last 10 years because we see there's an imbalance, because we see there's not enough competition. And that didn't change with connectivity. Actually, that's being enhanced through connectivity because a lot of the things will be done through the manufacturers or through different players. It's added value for consumers, provided that you actually have the competition there. So in my view, in sense of looking back to what Commissioner Breton and Vestager said, nothing has changed. There's still a fair need to regulate that sector a bit more in details. We were told for a long time that the Data Act would be the overarching regulation, that it would actually give the overarching framework for every sector, including ours. But we were also told that we understand there are a lot of specificities in the car sector that will call for sector-specific legislation. Nothing has changed. The Data Act is actually giving this broad framework. We are contributing to it. We think it has some good elements in terms of empowering the consumers with their data and so on and so forth. But to actually make that reality, to make that happen on the ground, we need something way more specific for the cars because they will generate billions and billions of data types throughout their lifetime, because the car is the most expensive things after your house. And because definitely we have been seeing that there's not enough innovation in the last couple of years where there's let's say, a monopoly over the data from the manufacturers. So yeah, nothing has changed fundamentally. The worry comes that at the end of the day, what happened last week is that it got stopped for political reasons. We don't believe it's in the interest of society or the consumers.
Understood. And why the urgency for this piece of legislation then?
I always have to laugh a bit when people talk about urgency. Now, I've been there 10 years. And we've been talking about access to car data for 10 years. So I think we see more and more vehicle manufacturers making predictions about how much money will be derived from the car data, and we have predictions from 250 to 600 million by 2030. Urgency, if you call it like this, is that more and more vehicles are connected. They could actually yield a huge amount of benefits for consumers, but because the data is in the hands of a few who are monetizing it, it won't realize neither the societal goals of a greener and more sustainable mobility, nor transition into something that's actually valuable for consumers. So consumers won't want to embrace that digital transition unless they're empowered, which they're not. Only with the Data Act, they need something more specific.
And what would be the time frame to make it possible under this European mandate?
We need the proposal to go out as soon as possible. I mean, we were hoping for it to go out very soon, but indeed, I think it would really be a disappointment across the board for the sectors, for the citizens, if that didn't happen in that mandate of the Commission. We're all aware of 2024, and 2024 for the Commission, mid-2024 for the Parliament. This proposal needs to go out in the next month or two so that we can actually work on it meaningfully and that we get something off the ground. And let me remind you that that was part of the assignment given to Commissioner Laurianne as well, to make sure that we have something on the table in this mandate. So that needs to happen.
Indeed. Laurianne, what kind of services might the European families and companies be losing?
Well, at the moment, what we see, I mean, it's a bit unclear. I mean, I have two examples. What we see is a lot of convenience, a lot of predictive maintenance. We will tell you when we think your battery is about to drop, and even in a non-electric vehicle, battery failures are often the case for breakdowns. So we will minimize the breakdowns. You won't have a breakdown. You won't have a problem with your brake pads because you will know in advance and you'll be able to change them. So there's a whole lot of things here. Obviously, there's a lot of things around insurance and having insurance more tailored to your need or your use. If you're a safe driver, you will have potentially big discounts on your insurance because you can show that you're a safe driver. There's also all the things we don't know. And interestingly enough, in our event in the Parliament the other day, the MEP was mentioning, well, yeah, people are very conscious about the cost and the cost of running their vehicles with the cost of fuel and so on. So she was telling me, well, basically that would be one of the things that we will need to look at. And interestingly enough, the real-time consumption is not something that the manufacturers have got their own applications for, because they have been implying for years that this is part of their trade secrets and that they actually don't want to tell consumers how much the vehicles are really consuming. So there are, I think, a wealth of application that have not yet been developed and that could be developed by the aftermarket if given sufficient access to the data. So to answer your questions, a lot of it would be predicting maintenance, preventing breakdowns, insurance, convenience of all sorts, helping you go from A to B, offering you alternative routes and so on. And the rest is yet to come.
This seems incredibly interesting for most of the car consumers and users in Europe. It also seems quite clear to us at FIGIFA that this sector-specific legislation is very important, highly needed to the Europeans to have a free choice of sustainable, affordable, and in proximity services, and that there is no technical or legal barrier to stop its development in this EU mandate, if there's political will, of course. We remain a little bit optimistic and hope that Mr. Breton and the whole Commission keep their word and make it happen this year. We want to know, dear listeners, your opinion. Please comment and give us your feedback. Thank you very much for your clear explanations and taking the time to join me today, Laurianne. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
And a big thank you to all of you for listening to our today's episode. Stay tuned. We'll come back with more automotives soon. Have a lovely day wherever you're listening from, and goodbye.
That was today's Automotives episode. Subscribe to our channels for more to come.